Good evening. I am Devi Ward, and you are listening to Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education. I want to thank you for tuning in live every Thursday evening on CTR Network and TuneIn.com, and you can catch the replay of the show again on Saturday evening at 7 p.m. on CTR Network and TuneIn.com. And don't forget, you can always subscribe to the show in iTunes any old time, as well as follow me on TuneIn.com at Sex is Medicine. This evening, very excited to actually have here in my own home personal studio one of the graduates from last year's Tibetan Tantra Certification Training Program. I just got back myself, just getting back in the swing after a beautiful weekend of supporting Dakas and Dakinis in expanding and integrating their tantric wisdom that they've been training with me so hard this past year and demonstrating their skills and learning new skills. And it was just an epic weekend. And if you want a sneak preview of what we, or a review of some of the fun we were having, you can catch a clip of me giving a Tibetan Tantra twerk transmission to one of our students. You can catch that on our Tibetan Tantra YouTube channel or go to my Devi Ward Tantra LLC Facebook page. We've got the video posted for you there. It's pretty phenomenal. And my previous year certification student, Martha, is all the way from Norway. You want to say hello, Martha?
Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here in the studio live with Devi during the show, because usually I listen to the show 10 hours later in Norway, far away.
It's wonderful to have her here, spending some time keeping me company, doing our Tantric Dakini dance. And this evening, it's an evening of Dakinis and incredible goddesses. I have on the line, all the way from St. Louis, Missouri, a beautiful, incredible, empowered woman, Dr.Lexx, and she's going to be talking with us about the relationship between sex and our self-image, and I'm guessing also our self-esteem. A little bit about Dr.Lexx. She is the founder and CEO of the Institute for Sexuality and Intimacy located in St. Louis, Missouri. She has a PhD in human sexuality and is also a licensed marriage and family therapist who subspecializes in sex therapy. She has a passion for working with couples in conflict and women who are struggling to find their peace in life. Dr. Lexx won the William Staten Award for Leadership in Human Sexuality, and she also won first place for her presentation on Black women, sexual fantasy, and power. So she is quite an accomplished, empowered, and information-bearing goddess, and I am so interested to hear what wisdom she has to share with us this evening. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Lexx.
Oh, my gosh, Debbie, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that wonderful intro. I appreciate that. I'm going to take all of that, soak it up for my self-image.
Yes, soak it up. So sex and self-image. I was really excited to have this conversation with you, particularly because I know for me, I know that so many of the choices that I've made in my life, both sexually and non-sexually, have been a direct reflection of my self-worth, or in many cases, my lack of self-worth. And the way that we see ourselves informs our sense of self-worth. But that, it's a subtle distinction. So I would love if you could kind of tease out the subtle difference between our self-image and our self-esteem and how those two work together.
Right. So, you know what? Some people actually might put those things together, but there are some subtle nuances. So our self-image comes from how we see ourselves. And sometimes I'm going to use a Johari window example here. Right, there are things about ourselves that we see and that we know about ourselves and that we choose to show to the world. And then there are things about ourselves that other people see that we might not see for ourselves. And then there are things about ourselves that we know individually, but we don't share with the world. And then there are things that we don't know and the world doesn't know. And that's kind of how our self-image comes together. It's all of these four parts working together to figure out who we are. Our self-esteem is how we feel about those parts of who we are.
Wow. Okay, so that's profound. So could you relay those once again for our audience, because it's a totally new concept for me, and I'm guessing for many people out there. Those four parts, just quickly review again.
Okay, so it's called the Johari window. It's perfect in Google. And what you do is it's your part of yourself that you know, and then the part that other people also recognize. So that's one pane. The second pane is the parts of yourself that you don't really know about that other people see. And you might even see reflected in other people. You don't realize that's a part of you until you see that it's reflected. That's a second pane. The third pane in the window is a part of yourself that you know, but you choose not to share that with the rest of the world. So these are really private things, really things that you keep inside yourself, and things that you choose when to let them be known to the world. And then there's that part of yourself that's still self-discovery that nobody knows about, that nobody sees in you, and that you don't really know about yourself. So thinking that we're always growing and trying to become greater than ourselves and get to a place where you feel very comfortable and then we're going to grow some more in discomfort, that's that fourth page. So it's kind of unidentified to everybody. It's a big question mark. And that's how our self-image is put together. All four of these things existing at one time. And then your self-esteem is how you feel about those things. So are they characteristics that you like, that you don't like? Are they characteristics that make you feel good and safe in the world? Are they things that you want to change? Are they things that you get picked on about, that you feel bad about, that you feel shame about? And so your self-image is a reflection of those self-perceptions that you have both individually and that you show in the world.
So then how does our self-image, the way we see ourselves, how does that impact the way we move in the world sexually?
Oh, my gosh. There are so many ways. Let me start by expanding kind of what we mean when I say sexuality, right? Oftentimes people think that sexuality is based on those first three letters of S-E-X, and they forget that it's more than just the behavior. So when we talk about sexuality, we're not talking about the physical coming together of genital parts. What we're talking about is a holistic sexuality. So it involves attitudes, values, and feelings. And there's a great little nifty tool that Devi came up with, and it's called the Circles of Sexuality. And it has these 5 encompassing parts that are amazing. And they talk about sensuality, using your senses and psychological and physiological pleasure. They talk about intimacy, which is being able to have emotional closeness with another human being and feeling that love and emotional closeness in return. They talk about sexual identity and who you are in your mind and what your sense of maleness or femaleness or not sense of maleness and femaleness is. And then there's sexual health and reproduction, which most of us in the world can pretty much cite 2D because that's the education we get. But then there's also sexualization. So it talks about our sexuality and power and those domains, right? So it's talking about how our sexuality and our sexual selves are affected by self-image. I would say each one of those circles can be touched. If we see ourselves in negative lights or unimportant or not worthy of, we don't seek out intimate relationships where we feel safe, where we can share with others, where we can take risks, where we can be vulnerable, where we can trust other people. If we don't value our self-image, we don't think that we deserve touch, right? So let's take an example of ageism, people who get older in life. Oftentimes, touch dwindles for those people because the skin changes or their body changes, and people don't think that they need to be touched as much because it doesn't feel the same as when you're touching somebody who's young, warm, with very taut skin. And that can have a negative effect. So older people might think, am I not sexy anymore? Am I not worthy? Do I not smell good? We all might have that idea of that old woman that's a grandmother or that old aunt that you had to kiss and be forced to kiss when you were little who smelled kind of funny. You're like, I don't want to put my mouth on that person. Ew. Right? And it's like, what does that say for that person's self-image? What does that tell them about themselves?
Yes, basically that they're unlovable.
Right. And or they're repulsive or they're not wanted. And let's even, I don't want to condemn the media, right? Because everyone's like, oh, this big beast of the media machine. And I think there's a lot of positives that come from media usage. But I think we have to look at the messages we get and how we code them for our holistic sexuality. So what are you watching? Do you see yourself in it? Does it tell you that you're beautiful or that you need to be thin? And then what does that need to be fixed look like? Does it mean you need to be thinner, taller, blonder, bluer eyes, less tan, more tan, bigger butt, bigger breasts, bigger penis? Like, what does it mean when you're looking at these things? And what are you consuming? And how are you trying to change your self-image to fit into these images that are being fed to you?
And so one of the things that you say is that self-image is under media attack. So what you said just, I think, is representative of that. We look to, well, we as human beings, we learn through modeling, right? We see what other people are doing and we mimic that, we imitate that, right? And so media, I think the impact that it has on human psychology is truly underestimated in mainstream America. We look at media, we see these images of these shiny, happy, glossy people, and we think that, everyone's supposed to be shiny, happy, glossy, and unless it's wrapped in a beautiful package, it's not, valuable or worthy. But another thing you mentioned is that especially for people of color. So could you explain that more in depth? Why is media so, the self-image that's projected through media, why is that so detrimental for people of color?
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you asked that. So I just came from Cuba. I got to have the opportunity and the blessing to go to Cuba as on a research trip, on an education trip. And what was profoundly sad to me, and what I'm learning, is that throughout the world, the traits that are considered with black people, so the stereotype traits, the thick lips, big breasts, big hips, dark skin, curly, pinky hair, are not attributes that people often want or find beautiful.
Wow.
And they're shifted. They're supposed to be shifted. So they're supposed to be straightened or blonder, or if you're a certain body shape, you're supposed to be this ultimate sexy femme. And I'm finding this is a consistent thought throughout the world. And I have no idea where these seeds. I could not even begin to figure out the epidemiology of it. And I was taken aback. I was like, what? So they had a sculpture of a mandingo, right? So a very dark man with very thick African facial features with these super huge phallus. And I was like, where did this come from? I'm in Cuba. I'm so shocked. And
wow.
I think that media it's dominated by people in the culture of power, right? So people who have the power in the world, especially, I'm going to say the United States, are saying, like, no, this is what's best. There's this white standard of beauty that exists that people try and form themselves within. And when you start to have a higher self-esteem about your self-image, so you start to reject those notions that you get from the media, you can reject those standards of beauty too and identify that you're just enough. You're beautiful no matter what you look like, no matter what your hair, no matter what your skin is, acne, no acne, whatever, tan, not tan, whatever. You find that I don't have to conform to these standards of beauty and these standards of images that I achieve to be worthy.
Yes. Beautiful. So that's a beautiful point you make, because I myself have experienced that switch as well, growing up as a biracial woman in this culture and, always being told, well, that just basically that my blackness was ugly, right? So for me, it's been a huge healing journey to not just accept, but to celebrate all the uniqueness of my heritage, all of my heritage, black, white, Native American, whatever, Czechoslovakian, all of it, right? So there comes a point in our human development, and what you said was when you have enough self-esteem, when you have enough self-worth, we can stop buying into the bullshit, so to speak, right? We can stop buying into to what's being fed to us through media. And yet, the concern is for the young people who are growing up immersed in this very media porn culture and being fed unawares spoon-fed unawares these idealized standards of beauty. And I know that, and I know that this affects people, pretty much everybody who doesn't fit into a stereotype. So it fits, people who are a size 16 have pain about self-image, and people who are transgender have pain about self-image, and people who are, anything that doesn't fit into this nice, pretty little box is going to experience pain around self-image. And so it sounds like the only escape is kind of like from the inside out, to do our own inner work, to come to our own inner peace and self-acceptance, and then we don't buy into the bullshit.
I love that you said that. That's exactly why I got into therapy in the first place. A little bit, like you said so much in my bio, I was pre-med physics when I was in undergrad and was going to med school, and completely useless now except for colorful metaphors. But I wanted to heal people from the inside out, and I think that's part of it. And I'll say that, one, I'm super proud of you for doing the work to be able to accept all of you, because you can exist in a gray spot where people want to make you choose who you are. And I'm really happy that you found a way to incorporate all of yourself.
Thank you. I kind of didn't think I had a choice, so I just that was kind of like the only thing to do. Thank you. It's wonderful to hear it was the right thing.
Well, for you, it was. I would also say that you were talking about the young people. I'm more fearful for the adults, and I use the term adults loosely. I mean older people that have started to concretize their thinking, because those are the people who tend to raise their children to not be as flexible, right? Kids' minds are flexible. They change at any given minute, and they'll be like, well, I believe this one day, and they're like, well, no, I think I believe this. Then you can present them with new information, and it's not as caustic. But for adults that have concretized their way of being and have been such a way for so long, it's too much to even consider being different, because then they lose all the stuff that they believed in. So they're not able to trust their self-esteem about themselves without those notions and their self-image.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that you're less concerned about the young people because their minds are malleable, and more concerned about older people who are fixed and who haven't gone through the process of self-love and self-healing and self-acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm worried about the people that they produce and the relationships that they're in that are examples for those young people.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like. So somebody grows up with a norm, like, well, this is my normal. It's my normal to bleach my skin. It's my normal to think that I'm ugly unless I look this way or if I'm a certain weight, or until they're old enough to start to rebel against it. But there are generations who they're raising the next generation. And they're like, no, this is the way I am. This is what it is. You should be out in the sun too long because you're going to be too dark and you're going to be too ugly.
Yeah, so I guess the next step the next question is, what do we do to resolve that? How do we kind of break that cycle? How do we make these young, minds that are flexible? How do we bring information to them and make them aware that the typical standards of beauty are not the only option for us as human beings? So do you have any ideas regarding that, Dr. Lexx?
You know what? I think that's a great segue into this idea about moral development.
Ooh.
So there was a researcher, and she was studying up under a man. His name was Kohlberg. And she was like, we're only studying boys, and this doesn't really make sense for their morality, looking at how they developed. And I found this model that she came up with to be just amazing and so applicable across many different conversations. So in this first stage, she says that women, and it's specifically for girls, but I think, again, it's applicable across all genders. And the first stage is that people are in this mode of individual survival. They come into the world this way. It's, I have to learn how to survive. And they might not ever leave this stage in life. They might stay there. So think of like the good times, you're scratching and surviving. And then there comes this point where there's a transition and you're not selfish anymore. You're not trying to just survive. You're not doing everything just for you. But then you start to have this responsibility for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And in having that responsibility for other people, you might start to think that self-sacrifice equals goodness. So this is when you think of the mom who needs a new pair of shoes. And everybody in the house needs a new pair of shoes, but hers have holes in them, but everybody else gets a new pair of shoes before she does.
Mm-hmm.
So she's sacrificing, and that makes her a good mom. Right? The husband is going to sacrifice not taking all of his vacation days so he can make more money for the family, if we're going with that type of example. And now he's a good husband because he sacrificed. And the more you sacrifice, that more it makes you a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And then there comes this other developmental phase where you start to go from being this kind of good person based on your sacrifice to a person that recognizes that you're worth too. And you don't have to hurt others, but you also don't have to hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you should respect yourself just as you respect others. And I think that's what we have to get kids to. I'm a Southern woman, so I'm from Georgia, and I live in the Midwest now. And oftentimes in black cultures, there's this idea that kids are seen and not heard, and kids don't have voices, and you ain't got no rights because this is my house and I pay the bills. And maybe that is a great way to raise kids, depending on that time period. But we also have to give kids that space to say that you're a whole person, and you do have rights, and I care about you, and I respect you within a realm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way that we're going to start to get kids to have better self-images, because they're not going to let themselves be mistreated and disrespected in the relationships, those intimate ones. And that goes for friendships, family relationships, and sexual relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very, very wise and very, very much agreed. So it starts again. It sounds like it starts in the home, and it starts with parenting. And so what we need healthy adults in order to raise healthy children.
Oh my gosh, that is the understatement of the year.
So how do we do that, Dr. Lexx? How do we, because in my modality, I have a lot of people ask me, well, how do you feel about, teaching sex ed to kids, sacred Tantra to kids? And I'm like, I think that's great, but my passion, we're, as adults, we are effed up, man. We are seriously wounded. And so my whole orientation and passion is I want to go where there's the most pain. And so I wanna educate the adults and heal the adults. Well, I want to give adults tools to heal themselves, right? Because I can't heal anybody. It's it's a self-healing process. So what do you think we should do?
Well, and that's where I'm excited, because my work, my passion lies in specifically helping Black women and women of color find places of safety and being able to be powerless. So being able to lay down kind of their burdens and just be human. Mm-hmm. And I think that in recognizing we don't know everything and we don't have to be the authority all the time as adults, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, let me find that out. Then we can start to give that to our children, too. For some reason, curiosity gets stamped out with school systems now. It's not like, hey, explore this on your own. It's, I'm telling you what you need to learn, and you need to be able to tell this back to me.
Yes.
And so their individuality is limited. And so for adults, we have to feed and foster that within ourselves first. Mm-hmm. Because we also lost it. We lost it trying to get into this capitalist society where everybody's trying to get ahead. And you're grinding as much as you can to try and get ahead. And you forget, like, oh, yeah, there used to be these things that I enjoyed. And, oh, yeah, I don't have to have so much stuff in my house in order to say that I made it. I can nurture and not buy and exist differently in the world based on the images of, quote, unquote, what I'm supposed to be. So I think adults have to start to do that, reject some of that stuff, let it go.
Hmm. I think that's a really good point, because that was a big shift for me recently in my life when I went from, striving to be this image of what I thought, success looked like, to connecting with what's really important, which is connection. and community and love and being of service and supporting one another in this crazy human experience that we're having. So, yeah, I totally am on board with you. Like, again, it comes, I think the values that are portrayed in this culture, and mostly, again, through media, are that whoever has the most dies with the most toys wins, right? That's the mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And growing
the best Jordans, the newest Jordans that were released 15 years ago but are being re-released.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, you have Jordans, but you can't read.
Right.
And nobody in your house can read.
Right. The priorities and the value system and what we prioritize and make important in our lives to pursue and to have. And so a question that came up for me when you were speaking earlier, so your passion is working with women of color and Black women particularly to create a safe emotional space and mental space, it sounds like, spiritual space. What are some of the unique challenges regarding self-image that face Black women particularly? I think you touched upon them earlier, but I'd love to hear more about that. Especially the challenges in America.
And women of color, this is really unique. Let's take a cisgendered, so same mind, same body. I believe that I was born female and my body is female, so I identify as female, right? So not a transgendered woman. And let's also make her straight, so she's heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
So a Black woman that is heterosexual and cisgendered will experience at least triple oppression. So
Wow.
she will experience classism, racism, and sexism.
Wow.
All at once in the world. And so Black women are brought up to idealize this notion of the superwoman. So I can do everything, right? I'm Whitney Houston's. I'm every woman. I can do everything through me. It's great. I can feed a family on $1. I can save my church. I can climb up a flagpole and take down a Confederate flag. I can go to jail. I can still come home, feed my children and neighbors' children, and take care of my man, my grandparents, my parents, and the rest of my family, and go to work full-time, right? So she's the superwoman. And she is taught to amass power. So she's an authority. She's the person who has knowledge. Black women are the most educated population in the United States.
Really?
Because knowledge is
wow.
Power. Right? So she's taught to do all of these things and to idealize it. And this is what you're supposed to be, and this is how you're supposed to raise your daughters. Right? And
yes. To be invincible.
No space. Exactly. It gives them space to be vulnerable. Because vulnerable and vulnerability equals weakness. You can't cry about that. Be strong.
Yes.
You shouldn't show that you're angry about that or that it hurts your feelings, because then you're not being strong. Right? Oh, just brush it off and get over it. Keep it moving. Move forward. Don't let them see you sweat. When you've been justifiably wronged or mistreated or put down, I'm not saying you have to go and flip over tables, but that doesn't mean you have to swallow it either. But for Black women specifically, and I'm still talking about cisgendered, heterosexual Black women, when you're finding that you are constantly at a deficit and constantly meeting at least 3 types of oppression, what's your adaptive response to having to be so powerful all the time? How do you find places of safety? Yes. Where? With whom? With Black men that you're fearful that are going to take your power away from you because they're also disenfranchised? With other Black women who you're fearful are going to take your Black man, or who you feel like you can't trust because you've been hurt before? With your family that you probably support in some way, shape, or form. And so it becomes very burdensome. And Black women suffer because of it. Depression, anxiety, not feeling fulfilled in intimate and sentimental relationships, not being able to trust. We see with people burning Black churches, killing Black women, no media, killing our kids, that the world can't be trusted with us. So where do we find that safety? And that's my work. My work is trying to help Black women find places where they are safe and being able to garner trusting relationships where they can be vulnerable.
And these places of safety that you help them find, are they places of safety within themselves?
It starts within themselves. It starts within themselves where they can learn to trust their judgment, where they can learn to trust that putting themselves first isn't going to be the end of the world, and where they also learn to trust where they can fall to pieces, but they can be put back together again. Also, I run into this notion with my clients that they can't fall to pieces because they'll never be able to get back up again. If they become this puddle on the floor, that's it, and everything's going to fall. All their spinning plates are going to fall. Because oftentimes they feel like the linchpin and the glue.
Yes.
So it's learning to trust that, no, you don't have to do everything for everyone, and it's okay to say no. Helping them transition from that self-sacrificing idea that Gilligan had into you being a person and deserving that respect and love too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I had a beautiful question, and it just completely floated out of my mind. I know what I wanted to say. Something that was really stirring within me with what you were describing, the emotional stance in life that you're describing for most Psi women, of black women of color, is the body armoring. So in my work is about dismantling and undoing and releasing and healing that body armoring and how the understanding of how our emotions can impact our sexual experience and our ability to actually experience pleasure. So if we're constantly holding back and holding down and repressing our emotions, we are literally holding down and holding back our sexual expression and our ability to experience sexual pleasure fully and deeply and powerfully. Because in full sexual release and full sexual expansion, that is completely vulnerable. It's egoless. There's no I in orgasm. I say that frequently. So in order to reach our full sexual potential, we have to be completely open and completely vulnerable. And that's impossible to do if we're trying to keep it all together in every moment.
And I'm so right there with you, Devi. I love that. I love the no I in orgasm. That might be like something on my wall with your name to it with 2015. I'll cite it. But I think that also because there's no trust.
Yes, exactly.
I don't trust myself to fall apart. I don't trust you. Yes. I don't trust myself to be able to lay down these burdens and to pick them back up again because you're going to take away my power from me. So I definitely insert that. It's that emotional piece with that body armor and not being able to surrender completely. I don't like the feeling of orgasms because my body is out of control, someone might say.
Exactly.
It's like, what makes you feel like you have to control everything?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I do want to say, as far as the superwoman that you painted, I think that affects women, period, at least in North America. I don't know much about other cultures, so I can't speak to that. But certainly the idea of the superwoman having to keep it all together, that absolutely affects white women, Middle Eastern women in North American culture, like part of the Western North American culture, Latino women, this idea that to be successful, to be empowered, to be this, the idealized version of the empowered woman who has a career and a family and can get up at 6 a.m. and take care of the kids and go to work and come home and fix the man a martini and all of that is, it's ingrained in North American culture, and it causes pain for women, Psi women, across the board.
I agree. I think that for black women it's specific, though, because of the hurdles of oppression that they have to face.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
So, women make 77 cents on the dollar. White women. Black women and Latina women make 67 cents on the dollar.
Wow. Yes, exactly. So there's an absolute disadvantage, or I don't want to use that word disadvantage. There's an absolute inequity happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep. And so I think that's where that social justice reform needs to come on in there.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah, I agree that it affects all women. I think that, and again, I was only talking about black cisgendered women. Let's not even talk about black trans women that have been murdered this year. So many black trans women have been murdered this year, and nobody knows about it. It's not a cost on black trans women. You don't see that on CNN.
No, exactly. And in no way did I mean to demean or take away from the fact that, yes, absolutely, and I know firsthand, as a woman of color, as a black woman. It's a unique hurdle, and we need to talk about it. It needs to be recognized and addressed, because the playing field is not equal. It is not a level playing field, and we cannot go bumbling around in this culture saying and pretending that it is, because quite frankly it isn't. And there are absolutely things that can determine whether or not you're going to get a fair chance in life or not, and they need to be addressed, they need to be acknowledged. I want to touch upon that because that is not a conversation that we have very often, and I want to pinpoint some of those stereotypes and how they can negatively impact the self-image for women of color, and also how they relate to women regardless of color. So Dr. Lexx, could you fill us in on some of these stereotypes that pertain specifically to black women in this culture?
Sure. So there are a few that apply to black women, but I'm just going to go over the major types, right? So the archetypes. One is the Jezebel. So this is the idea that you would maybe fit into the Jezebel category because of your mixed race and mixed heritage background. So this was the kind of quote-unquote tragic mulatto. She's mixed, she's sexy, she oozes sex. This is who the plantation mistress was so afraid of because she was going to seduce her husband and take her away from the marital bed.
That would be me.
Then there... I'm sorry?
I said that would be me. Totally.
Well, with your Tantra, maybe.
I didn't know it was body armor. I didn't know it was a stereotype. I thought it was just me, but that works.
So there's also the mammy, right? And the mammy is the idea of the fat, black, dark-skinned woman. If you think of, maybe there was an episode of Different World where Kim, who was the dark-skinned one that wanted to go to medical school, was on there, and she was a little bit rounder than the other characters. And she takes care of her family, of the white family, better than she takes care of her own, because she's so ingratiated to them, and that's what it demands. But she also takes care of the community. And lastly, there's the idea of the sapphire. And this is kind of like the Claire Huxtable. So she's the ball buster. She's like, don't come for me unless I send for you. I'm going to tell you when I want sex. And that's just how it is. The neck popping, lip smacking type even can roll with the big ones and bring home the bacon too. Mm-hmm. So these are the basic notions of how black women get categorized in research, in movies and stereotypes. If you think of even beloved Shonda Rhimes, right? So thinking of her shows, Grey's Anatomy. So Bailey is a mammy. She takes care of everybody else more. She takes care of her. She just became sexual this season after 10 years.
Yes. And I was thinking of you because I have to say I love Grey's Anatomy, but after booking the interview with you, and I think you had mentioned Shonda Rhimes, so I'm watching the show with these new eyes and absolutely seeing the stereotypes. And oh my God, anyway, yes. Totally agreed. So
yeah,
sorry,
it's great. It's great. They all amass to try and be a superwoman, and then there's these things up underneath. The Jezebel would be Olivia Pope. So she's with white man. She's seducing him from his wife. She's not mixed, but she has straight hair, lighter, more European features, and is super sexy in whatever she wears, and is always in white. It's great. And then the Sapphire is How to Get Away with Murder. Right? She's the ball buster. She's like, I want to have sex with you right now. I won't have sex with you. You do what I say. I can use my sex because I'm powerful. And there are these images that we're bombarded with, even from people of color, right? People of color producers still buy into these images of what black female sexuality is supposed to look like.
Yes.
And now it's like, is this what I want to be? And it's fine if you do. It's absolutely fine. That is your choice, and there's no judgment there. If that's what works for you, what feels good for you, what makes you feel good at the end of the day, then be you, boo. Do it. But if not, if you're feeling shameful, if you're feeling like this is your survival tactic, and this is the only way, and you don't feel respected by yourself or by others, then maybe it's time you start to reject some of those images.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And explore the fact that there are an infinite number and an infinite variety of flavors of sexual self-expression, and that we don't have to be trapped in our cultural conditioning, that we can break free of that and claim who we are in every moment and be fluid in that expression, which I think is the most beautiful thing in the world, to not have to be trapped in any particular box or any particular stereotype, but to be able to be fluid and to remain deeply connected with myself and my body and what feels right for me from moment to moment to moment. I think that's freedom. We apparently had some technical difficulties, so we totally apologize for that. But I was so enjoying the conversation with Dr. Lexx. And in the meantime, while we try to get her back on air, I'm just going to give you some information about where you can find out more about Dr. Lexx and contact her directly. She has a wonderful video on It's Your Call with Lynn Doyle, and you can find it at, I'm going to spell it out for you, https://vimeo.com/38668091, which is one of her interviews. And you can email her directly at lexsexdoc@gmail.com. That's with 2 X's, LEXXSEXdoc@gmail.com. And I believe we have you back, Lex. Is this true?
Yeah, I'm here. We had some technical difficulties, huh? I would. I love the idea of fluidity. And the fact that you can pick and choose and try on and take off and find the right fit and what's best fit for you.
And and I'm just going to conjecture here. I think that's one of the things that's coming up for me in regards to transgender issues, which hasn't been something that I've spent a whole lot of time exploring. But in the few conversations that I've had, this idea of having rigid sexuality, it seems like it causes people a lot of pain. So the idea of opening up our cultural paradigm of what sexuality and what gender can and should look like, and opening it up so that people can choose from moment to moment how they want to express themselves as human beings without judgment and without fear of recrimination. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And again, that's that safe space, right?
Yes.
So it's where are we safe at? Where can we do this and not have judgment and not have intimidation and not be picked out or picked apart for those choices. Exactly.
So I would love to hear more. We've got a few more minutes remaining. I'd love to hear more about the work you do and where you do it from and how people can work with you, because I'm sure there's many people listening this evening who would just yearn for some of the support that you can offer them.
Oh, that's so thoughtful for you to say. So as you said in that wonderful intro that you gave me, thank you again. I like being the information goddess. I am a therapist and also a sexuality educator. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I see individuals, couples, families, and do therapy with them. I come from a contextual background, which means I like to look at your family dynamics and how they play into who you are and who they've made you up to be and how you operate in the world. And I do therapy, and it's not just sex therapy, right? So there's sex therapy as a part of it. I'm going to ask you some questions about your sexuality and your healthy living, or how you want to make it healthier, or how you want to make your sexuality steamier, or whatever it is. But also I do couple, premarital, how to divorce, all of that, and ranges the gamut for therapy. Teenagers, not so much children anymore, but teenagers with teenage angst, and sometimes they turn into aliens in that developmental process, and it can be growing pains for the family. So I do all of that in my therapy practice. In my educational practice, I usually work as a consultant. My most recent work has been with Drexel's Medical School in Philadelphia, so educating their adolescent psychiatrists on how to do more holistic assessments regarding teenage sexuality and mental health, and the effects of mental health on teenager sexuality. So I educate doctors. I educate also corporations, where I do train-the-trainers. We do a lot of learning activities where we can create safe environments for work. So the fact that, gay marriage was just legalized across the country.
Woo-hoo!
Well, what does it look like when Paul might come out at work and he's getting married to Dan next week?
Yes.
Do you have an environment that's safe for that person? Do you have an environment that's safe for a person that is transitioning their gender? Do you know what pronouns to call them? Do you know, are there bathrooms that they can use? Like, how are we going to make that work atmosphere safe for them And so
Yes.
training people to make sure that they're making conducive and positive choices for all people across all spectrums of sexuality.
Beautiful.
I
And
also do workshops for groups, so groups of women that might want to learn some actual sexual techniques. It's not a sex toy party, so I'm not trying to sell you a toy at the end of it at all. Like, I have no desire and urges to do that. I have people that do, and they're amazing at it. I'm not one of them. But learning sexual techniques of pleasure for yourself or for your partners, that is where I really like to work with people in groups. So it could be a kind of a bachelorette party, but a little bit different spin on it. And I think the best way to reach me is actually through email. So the email that you give out is perfect. So it's Lexx, Lexx, sex, S-E-X, doc, D-O-C, @gmail.com. And I always have free 15-minute consultations. So give me a call, send me an email, and you can actually send me an email because I just said email me better. And I can get in contact with you, and we can talk from there. I give free 15-minute consultations via chat or via the email, or I can give you a call if you prefer, and we can go from there.
Beautiful. And you have a website. We've got like 2 minutes. Can you give your website address, because people are going to be listening to the show like a year from now, and your website is going to be up probably really soon. So if you could quickly give your website address.
It is. It's currently under construction, but my website address is Lexx, Lexx, sex, S-E-X, doc, D-O-C.com.
Awesome. So LexSexDoc.com. Thank you so much, Lexx. It was just wonderful to speak with you this evening, and I would love to have you back on the show in the future because it's just been so enriching, and I just think that there's so much more that we can talk about.
Debbie, this is amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to coming to one of your actual groups on Tantra.
Woohoo!
Making it happen.
All right. Fabulous. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We do apologize for the technical difficulties, and I'm really grateful that you stayed tuned in and hopefully turned on. And as always, you can catch me live every Thursday evening here on CTR Network and TuneIn.com at 7 p.m. You can also catch the replay on iTunes. Don't forget to subscribe every time you listen to the show. You can't do it too many times. And if you want to connect with me or send me any questions for future shows, you can do so at DavyWardTantra.com. I do believe I will acknowledge that I completely forgot to answer a listener's question in the show. I won't forget next time. Have a beautiful weekend. Peace in, peace out.